All right, welcome to the Snowflake Sports Podcast. It is 7:36 Eastern Standard Time, and I am joined by Chris Amato, resident Knicks fan. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, I like how you have me to come on just to talk about every bad team,
Yeah.
Raiders, Knicks, or anything that's the most kind of depressing situation going on. You kind of bring this low voiced guy on who's probably high half the time. It makes sense though. It fits the theme.
Oh, you gotta smoke when
I'm actually not this time. I'm in a good,
wow.
I'm in a good
Look
state of mind. Yeah, 'cause I don't know. I was busy up until now, right up until 20 minutes ago. So I'm still kind of I'm in an active state of mind.
Mr. Amato.
Yep.
He's growing up.
The kids don't know how hard I go. They really don't.
Oh no. I mean, when we were growing up, right, we had no idea how our teachers were.
A couple of them you knew though. You kind of there was rumors around and they would
true.
joke about it.
That's true.
For me, it's I'm under the radar.
Yeah. All right, just for the agenda today, we're going to talk about the Josh Norman signing of today.
Not bad.
Spike Lee and the Knicks fiasco, Battle of LA Part 3, pretty much MVP talk for the NBA. Then we're going to go to the politics side and talk about the Super Tuesday results and the tomorrow state primary predictions.
Oh my God.
So we got a lot to do, a lot of
Knicks fiasco Part 90.
Part 90, yeah. Anyways, but just to briefly talk about the Bills, they signed a 1-year deal for Josh Norman worth $6 million, and it could be $8 million with incentives. He was a former All-Pro selection in 2015, but it's kind of fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, he started half the games last year or something, right?
Yeah, and they were sneaky okay defensively, but I don't think he played
Well, the problem was I think a bad stat for a corner, even though it's kind of a good stat, at a mere surface level, is that he had 70 something tackles. I think he led the league in corner, and even though he only played, and he played in 12 games, started in 8, or maybe played in 15 or so, only started in 8, and he has 77 tackles, which usually means guys are just bursting into the secondary, and he has to. It's like when a safety leads your team in tackles, you're probably losing to 10 plus games.
Right.
That's just how it goes. So that was, I guess a bright spot is that I guess he's active. He's a guy who's he's aggressive on a defense. He's making those plays when they need him to. But is he still a good cover corner anymore? And if the Redskins coaching staff thinks that he's not worth starting on a pretty bad roster, but it's a 1-year deal and it's cheap. So, I don't think you can look at that deal and think anything but positive.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. He was basically making $11 million last year.
Yeah.
So he's gonna make
immediately that he's in a situation that's just not what he's going to be doing anymore. And when you start half the games for a bad team, that's your career is going a certain direction. And he's still very young, and McDermott is when he had his best years. I don't think he's had any crazy injuries. I could be wrong. I don't remember hearing about maybe I don't know an ACL tear or anything like that.
I don't know because at least with the Redskins, I got his stats up now. But he's played 16 games twice for them. He played 14 games 2 years ago. But you were right. So he only started 8 games last year and played.
It's very weird. I didn't see that until today, as I read stuff about the signing. And I said started 8 games. And I cringed. I was like, oh boy. But yeah, again, another bright side too is he might have been covering number. I think he was covering number 1 guys as far as I know with the Redskins. I don't know who else it would be when he's starting. I don't know what corner would be placed above him when he's on the field. So with Trey White there, a diminished Josh Norman. He has not just lockdown coverage ability, but he can pick stuff off. He can make those kind of plays in a secondary that's already surrounded with, Pro Bowl, All-Pro talent. If it wasn't for, I think it was Jordan Poyer who got kind of hosed with the Pro Bowl, you'd have a full Pro Bowl secondary right there. So
yeah.
It's not no one's leaning on him. There's no financial risk. There's no length risk. And again, because it's the NFL, unfortunately for the players, there's it's not guaranteed or anything like that. So it's a win-win-win.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like they're going to keep Levi Wallace anyway, so if he, does terrible in September, they could just throw Levi Wallace in.
Sure.
Be okay, just bench him.
Yeah, it's no problem. I mean, the thing is, I'm unclear. He must have been like totally a free agent right now. I think, right? They already cut him.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, so they like cut him. I think he had a year left on his contract for like 12 million or something.
Okay.
And they were
So I
just
was like, why
no.
is that able to happen? Like
Yeah.
a week before free agency.
I think it was like it's like the Tyrod situation where it's like, oh, we can only pay him like 3 million, or like we'd have to pay him like 20 million or whatever the number was. It probably was more like 15.
Yeah.
Or we could just cut him now, pay him 3, and then have the cap space. I think it was something like that. The only thing I'm kind of worried about this team though is like if they're going to be able to retain Jordan Phillips because he had 9.5 sacks this
people
year.
are like, I don't know. I mean, but I say people, I just mean like asshole Bills fans around here. It's not like anyone like important, but there's like this kind of acceptance of this idea that he could just be gone, and I can't imagine. Like, I mean, there's not a whole lot of bad scenarios for the Bills because they don't have a lot of free agents coming out. But like, if they're gonna have a bad offseason, it involves them losing Jordan Phillips. I mean, that's like the thing that would happen in a bad offseason. Because I think he's great. Maybe he'll ask for too much. Maybe some dumb team out there will pay him way more than the Bills think he's worth, and that's possible. But you're still looking at a diminished roster because of that. But who knows what other holes they can fill? Maybe they'll trade for, someone like Yannick Ngakoue, who right now it looks like he's gonna be traded. I mean, he is emphatically saying that he doesn't want to play with the Jags anymore. And I think it was smart of the Jags to at least try to get something for him, and I think he's worth the money that a franchise tag contract will be paying anyways. So, if they do lose him, even then they can still, there's Leonard Williams is going to be out there. Not that he's like a great replacement or anything, but he can definitely, plug that hole. So, there's other options, but I don't think there'll be any cheaper options, even if Jordan Phillips does kind of demand a big raise.
Yeah, I mean, also you got like Ed Oliver in there too, who can slightly.
Right, but a guy in the second year, you want someone to pair up with him, and maybe Jordan Phillips is the reason why Ed Oliver was making strides in the back part of the season. He was a little bit invisible. He was learning early on, which is that's what a rookie does. But then eventually, those big tackles for loss were starting to pile up, and if you want to continue that, you don't want to immediately make it, hey, by the way, you're our entire pressure in the middle of the line now, by the way. I just don't think you want to do that. I think he's going to stay though. They have tons of cap space, even if it might be a dumb contract.
So I'm just a little worried because they're going to have to pay Trey, so eventually. Yeah. So I feel like they're going to still have to, like, they can't overpay Jordan Phillips and then not have enough money for. Like, this is the problem with Yannick Ngakoue. They're not, like, the Jags don't have money to sign him, which is why they're trying to trade him. So I'm just worried that that'll happen. I don't think it will because they have so much cap space. And, like, Josh Allen's on a rookie quarterback deal. So I think they'll be fine either way. They just, like you said, like.
They need offense. They need offense, number one.
Yeah, they need a wide receiver, is pretty much.
It's anyone who can go out there and, like, just be a consistent guy who makes plays. I mean, I was not too surprised, but pretty surprised by how Smoke's season went. As far as being a number one guy, being I think he had like 1,100 plus yards. So I mean, but he's not going to take over a game. I mean, you didn't see him a lot in that playoff game for most of it. You didn't see much of the whole offense for the whole second half of that playoff game.
Yeah.
And and I think it's kind of like what their counterparts, the Sabres. It's like they get to like this point where it's like, okay, we have a roster, we're kind of competing, and then like an off season goes by and you look and it's like nothing's changed at all. Yeah. Nothing's changed, and then there's like this expectation that somehow just by sheer gravity things will just be better, and then they're not. So they got to be careful to not get into that cycle of just kind of being content roster-wise with what they have just because they made the playoffs, especially when you have this much cap space. I think it's like 86 million. Maybe it's like one of the five most in the league, I think, last I saw.
Yeah, I think it's 80. I thought I saw 84, but 84, 86.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's a lot of money they got freed up, and who knows who they'll be able to get. I mean, it's not a crazy. It's a very average free agent group, I think.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, the quarterback is the fun part with like Dak Prescott and Tom Brady, but
but really those guys aren't going anywhere. The Cowboys just offered Dak today, I think, like $30 million.
Yeah.
Maybe he won't accept that. I don't know. But like the fact that they're offering him that means like, okay, like, it's going to work out. Like if they're,
Yeah.
it's not like they're unwilling to pay him a lot of money if that's the offer that's on the table. So I just
Right.
I think the quarterback stuff is overblown. I just don't think teams want to get rid of guys who can prove that they can play, especially when Dak was running one of, if not the best offense statistically in the league, despite their, average record. So, I mean, he had the best year. That was probably the best football Dak Prescott's ever played in his life this past season. He was good. He was a guy I was not super sold on. Never really had like crazy stats, but he went out there and was, I think he led the league in pass yards or was top 2 or 3. And that's not the kind of guy he's ever been at any level. So, I don't know why you wouldn't pay him as much as you can.
Okay, so yeah, you pay him as much as you can. Then what do you do with Byron Jones? What do you do with Amari Cooper? Like you paid Zeke. Like
I think
one of
Amari
those guys have to
Cooper and
go.
probably Byron Jones are just going to have to go away. I think those are guys that are replaceable. I think there's a lot more guys like Amari and Byron Jones out there, especially in the draft, than there is a Dak Prescott. So to me, I'm convinced Byron Jones is gone.
Yeah.
I could see them throwing stupid money at Amari Cooper because I think Jerry Jones maybe has some pride locked up in the fact that he threw away a first-round pick for him. Not that he didn't play well, but he ultimately ended up, you literally look at his resume and it's like, okay, like you got the same kind of up and down guy he was with the Raiders where, he looked like a game breaker and then he, all of a sudden a month, 3 or 4 weeks go by and it's like, oh yeah, he's on our team. And that's what he is. Despite his own words that he's comfortable there and that now he feels like he's really in the NFL, those kind of quotes that he was throwing out there. That's kind of how it goes. And I think Cowboys fans have made noise about it. I think a lot of people are starting to notice it again, that's kind of how he is. But I feel like because of that factor, they're more likely to keep him than they are Byron Jones. That's just a gut feeling, just based on their past behavior over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I feel like they're more dependent on Amari Cooper too, and that's just like having him as an option for Dak Prescott is good.
Yeah, especially if you're paying Dak
when
that
you
much.
sign
It's like,
Dak,
well, but you don't know the behind the scenes stuff. Like, do Dak and Amari get along? Are they boys? Amari did not.
Dak seems okay.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's probably a better situation than whatever was going on with the Raiders, but as far as like how things were going with the team, but you just don't know. Yeah. And I think Amari's interesting because like I think it's so up in the air how much money he's actually worth. It's like you could see him getting a big contract, getting like for not that he should get like top 5 wide receiver money, but you can also look at the fact that okay, there's lots of good, like if you use guys right in the NFL, like there's lots of good receivers out there that might be even more replaceable than Byron Jones.
Yeah, actually that's a good point.
But, do you want to break up an offense that was so good when offense was far from their problem last year? So, Who knows?
That's true. Moving on along.
Week.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Spike Lee and the great Knickerbockers.
Yeah.
So last Monday night, Spike Lee attended the Rockets-Knicks game and tried to go through
the Knicks won, by the way. That's the highlight lost in this.
Yeah. That's the crazy part of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless you're under a rock, they told him that he had to leave the Garden and come back even though they already scanned his ticket. This led to a huge altercation with the security guards as well as Spike Lee.
He went to the different entrance. It was like the 33rd Avenue entrance or something like that.
Yeah.
But
he said on that first take where he went through it like the Wednesday before for like a mock.
He uses it a lot, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, this is Spike Lee. This is your number one, the biggest fan of the Knicks that has stuck with you for 28 years. And my only question for you is like, is this not the most Knicks thing that has ever happened to this team?
It's not, because I think just losing a lot of games is the most Knicks thing. But I think it's emblematic of like, how I think anyone would feel, who's been a supporter of the team for so long, right? Like you feel like you're constantly just getting shit on. Now me, unlike Spike Lee, Spike Lee is probably much more ferociously loyal than I am, because the fact that he was even still going to the games, honestly, was surprising to me. I thought, that Spike Lee, like maybe he's still going, but okay, like maybe once a week, maybe maybe he's doing some stuff or he's not really invested because he knows they're bad this year. The fact that he was still going every game and that's how they're treating him, I think says a lot. I mean, it was really just, it was like I wasn't surprised by any of it. There was no, I mean, the thing with Charles Oakley, another guy who's beloved by Knicks fans, and even more rightfully so because he was actually a player and like a really good player on teams that were championship contenders and are like, a part of a increasingly fading memory of like a good Knicks franchise, or especially a pre-Dolan Knicks franchise. Yeah. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing like you've been seeing more and more of, and it's like, you just don't know why. I mean, Spike Lee says he's been harassed by Dolan for like, however long. I don't know if he said like how long it's been going on, but can you imagine like this little troll Dolan just sneaking up on you like, hey, Spike, take a front row seat, like, just crap you. Yeah. Spike probably just didn't want to go to his like shitty like jazz concerts or whatever Dolan does. Like he has this little shitty jazz band he makes people just go to and see just because he's a rich guy. So I don't know. You don't know what goes on, and you don't know what goes on between him and the players either, or why people don't want to go there. Or there's just probably so many stories and just interpersonal shit that like someone watching on the outside can't see, but what someone watching on the outside can see is that this is a repeated pattern, especially over the last few years. Because all of a sudden, you thought in the early 10s with Melo, Stat, like, okay, those Isaiah Thomas years, those were, maybe we're not going to be great, but we're not going to be a joke anymore. And then all of a sudden, 7 years go by, and it's like, wow, this has been an even worse stretch than the Isaiah Thomas years. It's losing without charm. Like, if you're going to lose, at least have some, like, charm and, like, just interesting stuff and interesting players, or, like, kind of like, like the old Warriors teams, like pre-Steph Curry, or even some of those Isaiah Thomas Knicks teams had some fun players and, like, just kind of cool, like, Starbury and just, like, guys who, like, you felt like you could attach yourself to and actually root for and feel good about rooting for them, even if they ultimately just lost most of the time. But this has none of that. And, my only concern really, besides just not giving a shit about what they're doing on a consistent basis this year, is just, hopefully this Knicks poison doesn't just seep into RJ. That's all I'm asking for, because he's been pretty inconsistent, but he's shown a lot of flashes. He's been kind of what I expected at this point, but his free throws are pretty bad. He has whole games where he just like doesn't shoot well at all. So those are things that are really hard to fix. You don't normally see guys fix those things. You might see guys fix things like driving or being more aggressive or following less, but you don't see them fix those things a lot. Might get better, but but he's 19 too. But you just don't see those kind of things skyrocket over the course of a couple of years. And Kevin Knox is probably already a lost cause, even though all scouts and stuff insist that, he's still got a lot of room to grow. He's only 20, but that's a guy I was never high on though either. So
wait, he's only 20? I thought he was 21.
He might be 21 now, but this is his second season. He was 19 when he came out. So going into the year,
for some reason I thought it was his third year. You're probably right.
Yeah, well, they live in a time like warp, because just the losing just makes time just drag on and on. Like it's hell. It's literal. The Garden is a pit of hell now. At least when the basketball court is set up.
Yeah. Hockey's not that bad.
Yeah. Oh my God. I can rave on and on about the Rangers, man. That was a bad loss to the Devils, but I mean, they're just, the energy that they have is so, and it's crazy that Dolan owns them.
Yeah. See, the thing is though, is like I think he got lucky. Right, like he picked the right guy for a while.
Well, I think people hated Glenn Sather early on. They thought that he was like an old has-been guy who like just got his hands in stuff too much and should be more of a president type role. But he, you look at his overall career, it's like, okay, well, he ran the Gretzky Oilers, and then he went, and then you look at the 15 years or so of his time with the Rangers, and Rangers are relevant again by the time he was done. They got to a Stanley. It took a long time, though. I mean, it took like they were a playoff team after the lockout, and it was a kind of a neutral territory for like 5 years, and then all of a sudden they were making deep playoff runs. I think that because of, say, their stature, that maybe Dolan did get lucky. He saw the kind of shiny object, like, oh, he's the Gretzky guy, I'll get him. And it actually worked, at least somewhat, and it worked enough to keep Dolan out of it. And there's kind of like this idea that, like, oh, it's because Dolan doesn't give a shit about hockey, when, the people who actually know Dolan say that he actually likes hockey a lot. He was in the locker room, which scared me a little bit, but he was in the locker room after Mika's 5-goal game, congratulating him. So, he's aware of what's going on, and he's got his hands in stuff, and he approved personally that rebuild letter that I liked. Even though it was depressing, but I liked that they had this letter to the fans about their rebuild and being honest about it. So it's just very weird. And it shows you kind of like, okay, like, there are other, sports organizations that are that big now, $1 billion organizations. It's like, okay, like there are other people at fault. Part of it, you could say Steve Mills with the Knicks, who knows. But the Knicks have had such a revolving door that it is hard to blame anyone else, because he's been the only constant now for the last 20 years. And you see this continued deterioration in, not even just goodwill on the court.
He just got fired, though, right?
What's that?
Didn't Steve Mills get fired? And they hired
he's
Leon
gone
Rose?
now, yeah.
Yeah.
They fired him like a month ago.
Yeah. So, like, they're moving in the right direction. Like, he was the one constant.
Yeah, but then, they hire Leon Rose, and literally that day, this whole spike thing happens.
Right, but they won.
And they won. Right, I mean, they didn't change their team at all, but they won.
And they beat Detroit
but even
last
that
night.
was weird, because they didn't have a presser, which I don't care too much about that, but it was like stuff that was not normal about it, right? And I'm worried about this. Like, I think he's just late to the trend all the time, and I think he thinks there's this trend of oh, I just need a guy that's cool with a bunch of cool, good players, and that'll solve my problems with getting talent. And then, and it's I think especially with what you saw from the Nets this past week, it's maybe the players don't always know what the fuck they're talking about. Maybe maybe deciding that a team like the Nets, for example, fired a coach that was a very good coach, used to be with the Knicks, worked his way up to the assistant coach ranks, turned around the Nets, at least turned them around enough to, be in the playoffs with a fairly moderate roster before Kyrie and KD, and they just fire him in the middle of even when they're probably going to make the playoffs. I mean, it would be a pretty big collapse, even with their losing record. So I mean, it just shows you you think the players might not want, they think they know where they want to go or where they want to be, and then this shit happens. So I'm hoping that this Leon Rose thing is not some kind of overcompensation. But I don't mind Steve Perry, and he's the one actually making the personnel decision. So, I think things are okay. And they do have a lot of first round picks. I mean, they haven't made a lot of dumb moves lately. I think they did the best they could going into this year, considering people just didn't want to go there, and I think when people don't want to go there, it's if you're Steve Perry, that's not necessarily your fault, but what else can you do?
Yeah. So I guess going back to Kenny Atkinson, I mean, Jackie Mack had that huge article, I think, right when the season started, on how, Kenny Atkinson kind of runs, a college basketball, culture, and that's just not going to work.
I meant to say Scott Perry. I was thinking Steve Perry's a singer.
Isn't it? No, because you're thinking Steve Mills and then Scott Perry.
Yeah.
Probably. But so, I think that just clashed when you it's someone like Brad Stevens, and how Brad Stevens clashed with Kyrie, because he's this
Kyrie clashes everybody is what we now know.
Well, true, yeah. But I feel like you need that Ty Lue type, where it's I'm gonna just lay back and let the players coach the team, and whatever happens kind of thing.
Well, that's easy when you have LeBron.
Right, but I think you need a players coach. You need even though Marv Jackson, there's terrible stories of coming out for the Warriors, that wouldn't be a bad fit for the Nets, I think. Just because he has respect with the league and the players. But then I guess going back on your Knicks, they actually aren't making terrible moves. I thought the Marcus Morris trade was smart.
Sure.
They traded him for picks.
A lot of people say that. I mean, people think that Harkless was someone who they shouldn't have been letting go. The Clippers. I mean, They thought that he was a good contributor, and guys liked him on the team, and that's with a player like that, that's all you can really ask for. I think they just maybe they just thought that they saw Marcus Morris just jacking up way too many shots and playing a type of game that's not what he should be doing because there was no other scorer on the Knicks, and they were like, oh, this is a guy, this is what he is, playing like a shitty version of like mellow ball, which is basically what Marcus Morris was doing, and I think that was just a big misstep by the Clippers, and I think the Clippers too. I mean, we said we were going to talk about the Battle of LA, which at times has felt like just kind of scrimmages, but I think the game on Sunday was a lot more revealing than the last few games that we've seen. The one on Christmas was awesome. I'll give it that, because that was like down to the buzzer. But like, you just have large stretches of the game where it's like, does anyone give a shit here? Like, but I think LeBron really stepped it up, and Paul George was looking like that kind of MVP candidate he was last year. And when you have Anthony Davis and LeBron combining for like 60 points, and I think you can't like overthink or overanalyze what they're doing. It's just that's why they won, and that's why they're the 1 seed. They have two of the 5 most efficient players that have ever lived as far as PER goes, and it's unbeatable. I think, and I think it kind of sealed the deal as far as I'm concerned about where the Lakers are, as far as like, oh, are they for real? Are they truly the title contender? Are they? And I think that win, even though it wasn't like a blowout or anything, but it was pretty decisive. And I think, the Clippers have enough of those weird bad losses that have been recent. I think they lost to a D'Angelo Russell-less T-Wolves team not that long ago. I think they might have even gotten blown out. And that kind of stuck out to me. And you're seeing those kind of things pile up for the Clippers. And I don't really believe in the kind of like, the on-off switch, I feel like that's never actually worked out. I think early in the season it does. Like early in the season when you see like, especially with LeBron, it feels like it happens a lot with LeBron teams. I don't know if it's because they're overanalyzed a lot or what, but like, they'll start off like 3-4 or something, and people be like, oh, like, they're not clicking, and then all of a sudden it's like February and they're like way up there in the standings. I think in that case you can have the on-off switch, but like when it's this part of the season, when it's March, you're still having these games that are like happening or in the kind of close rearview mirror, and you're still having those kind of losses. It makes me question. Who knows? The Clippers can they lose to almost anybody in the West? Besides an 8 or 7 seed. Could they lose to the Rockets in a series? Those are the kinds of things I think that game makes me think of.
So I think you're completely wrong with that. So I looked up. So they got killed by the T-Wolves like a month ago, and they've actually been kind of clicking recently. Like Paul George has been playing great. Like when they have their full team,
Paul George has been a lot
I think
better.
they won like 4 or 5 games straight. So like they're clicking. I just think like LeBron has played a spectacular month of basketball, and I feel like he's just in his zone. He's basically in this like playoff mode that he said activated last year. So, and then when you
got over 10 assists.
Yeah, when you have like Anthony Davis and you just run a LeBron AD pick and roll, like that's literally unstoppable.
Oh yeah, they were doing the stuff the Clippers used to do with like the Lob City stuff. Like they just toss it up and he throws it down, and it's like it's just free points.
Yeah,
it's just easy.
But I don't see the Rockets beating the Clippers. They have so many defenders that can just switch, and it works. Except for like Lou Williams, I kind of almost want to not see him on the floor, just like defensively, and play maybe more of like Reggie Jackson.
The dude's old.
Yeah.
He's an old dude. Yeah. He's a good shooter. Exactly. He's still like, he's got handles. He's kind of like settled into like this kind of like Jamal Crawford phase. Like, no one's gonna. No one's complimenting they're not known for that. And maybe Lou Williams was, he was a 6th man of the year, I think, multiple times. So he's got some kind of an all around game. But like, what is he, 37 now? 36?
Not that old, but like 35 or something.
I'm looking it up right now. What's Lou Williams' age?
While you're doing that,
he's 33. Wow.
33. But so I thought Avery Bradley played really well too. And I thought it was just interesting, at least being a Raptors fan, like Danny Green, like absolutely disappeared.
Well, he was lighting it up from 3, wasn't he?
Avery Bradley or Danny Green?
Avery Bradley.
Oh yeah, he was killing it from 3.
Yeah.
But like Danny Green, he's just so inconsistent, and like if Avery Bradley didn't step up and like make those shots, like the Clippers could have easily won this game. They could have been 3-0, but I mean he did.
Yeah, well, he didn't.
Yeah.
I do at the very least, like the Clippers are not the favorites to win the West. Like I think that's like fairly, to me at least, that's fairly clear. Like I don't
Yeah,
think they beat the Lakers.
that's justified, but I think like the three teams that might win the title are the two LA teams and the Bucks, and I don't think anyone else is close. Like I don't think the Rockets are gonna
How cool
beat
is it for you that the Raptors are still a 2 seed?
I know, isn't it great?
Oh my
Like Pascal
God.
Siakam
Fred
just
VanVleet.
filled the Kawhi role, and then everyone else filled the Pascal role. It's amazing. And the Celtics
Siakam's a
are kind
superstar.
of falling off. So it looks like they'll get the 2 seed. Giannis is hurt, so maybe the 1 seed. Probably not because they're like
He's like day to day though, isn't he?
Yeah, he's fine. He'll
Yeah,
be back
he was
like
holding
next
his knee
week.
though. That's a little.
Yeah. All right, and then just LeBron MVP talk. So anyone knows me that I'm pretty big LeBron hater, and I'd like to bash him a decent amount.
Right,
But he's
skip
playing.
Bayless shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just an attempt. That's an attempt to get more listeners. Is to go for the LeBron hater crowd.
I guess, but I don't know. So I just never liked the style of play, whatever.
What do
But
you
he's
mean?
been
What? The
awesome.
phenomenal.
Well, he's just like a surveyor, right? He like goes, he
Surveyor.
dribbles, and he's just like dribbling the ball for like 10 seconds.
People
And he surveys
invent
the,
words
like,
to find ways to
thing.
say that LeBron.
Whatever. Okay. Anyways, he played spectacularly this month. I will admit that, and he's leading the league in assists, and like this season has been crazy for him. And he's like somehow wedged his way into this MVP conversation where Giannis is averaging like 30, 13, and 6.
He's a whirlwind of just creativity and like physical dominance and like still so much speed and just doing everything. He just does He's having over 10 assists a game from LeBron is the craziest. Is one of the stories of the year. Like just if you can make a story out of one stat. LeBron's assist average is like one of the, and to me, and I've said this either on your show or to you in some other capacity that to me this is one of the worst NBA, this is the worst NBA season in 15 years. But that alone, that's like one of the stories to me is LeBron and averaging over 10 assists a game. It's completely insane to me, and I feel like people take it for granted. Like he's a forward.
Yeah.
I know he's had seasons where he's had like 8 or so like. People who watch him every day, like it doesn't feel like 8 to 10 doesn't feel different if you watch him every day. But from someone who's observing a little more distantly, and maybe only watches them when they're on prime time on a weekends because you can stay up. It stands out. It's like he is all over the place, and he's all over the place in a team that has a guy who's 8 years younger than him and scores a little bit more than him too, and he's still playing that role. So he's able to make a guy like AD even better, who was already an MVP candidate on a kind of mediocre team to begin with.
Yeah. I guess can you divulge more on how you think this NBA season is the worst in 15 years?
Well, one, I think on the surface level right here, I mean, there's no playoff race, number one. I think that's the main thing. There's no like actual in-season storylines. It's not even just like, oh, the Knicks are bad. It's like, the Knicks have been bad for 7 years. Even if you take out 2 of those years where it was like they were kind of in the mix, but in February they still had Melo, but they were still bad. Okay, so that's still at least 5 years of being kind of this bad. So it's not even that. It's just like there's no. It doesn't feel like there's any like ferocity or competition or drama. I think you just have. It's just there's a lot of negative energy. I think there's a lot of negative energy. Some of it's not the league's fault. I think what happened with Kobe is a huge, awful thing that I think really hurts the season. It kind of puts like this cloud over everything. I think a big bright spot is the All-Star game. That was probably one of the 3 best All-Star games I've seen in any sport. So that was pretty nice to see. But like, there's just no, like, you watch the games and like and I watch a lot of the primetime games, not as much. But I feel like every time it's like a blowout or, guys are just moving over for a guy and just, and I'm not someone who's from like, I've never been the guy who's from like this mindset of like, man, they got to play defense in this league.
They got to pass the
Just
ball
like
more.
the kind of like
Yeah.
semi-racist like criticisms of the NBA, they're always there. It's really like it is noticeably different this year. The lack of storylines. It's not totally just like the game changed. Um, I do think, part of this is just being a bitter Knicks fan as far as people not going into the team. But I think there is because of the nature of the sport, there's so few players in it because the rosters are so small because that's how basketball works. It's become so noticeably insular, I should say, and kind of just like it feels like everyone just regurgitating each other's bullshit. And part of that is too, I think the NBA media is so ferociously pro NBA in a way where you don't get it in the other leagues. And whereas in the MLB, it's almost the opposite. The MLB is just everyone's like talking about how shitty the league is. Whereas in the NBA, everyone's like, this is the best league on earth. They can do no wrong. This and that. Kind of just brushing aside the repeated reports of, lower ratings. Like it's not a big deal. I just think there's a lot of bad stuff going on. Combined, to me, none of that would matter if there was interesting stuff going on in the regular season as far as like playoff chases or anything like that. The West is like, kind of flirts with being interesting once in a while. Like sometimes the Pelicans make a run. You got Zion, kind of made them a little better, but then they always fall right back to the pack. You saw it with the Blazers. I know one of the times I was on here, I was talking about how the Blazers, like if anyone's going to make a run for the 8th seed, it's them. There's probably still just as many games back as when I said that a couple months ago.
Yeah, but like, granted, Damian Lillard was hurt for a bit. Like,
Sure.
you could never see that. And I think I said that the Suns would take that spot, so we were both wrong in
Well, I
that
think when
regard.
I said that, he had just come back from another injury, I think. He had like a big game coming back from an injury, I'm pretty sure. And also Melo was like heating up.
Yeah.
They just CJ McCollum's still like pretty good, like 22 a game as usual, kind of 22, 23 a game. But like, they're just not breaking through, for a team that was right there on the cusp last year. And that's just interesting to see. I mean, in the East, you got the Magic are 29 and 35, and yet
Dude, shut up.
still,
The Magic are sick, okay?
and
They're
yet
Disney's
still have
team.
a 5-game lead on the 8th seed. Like it's virtually over, and they're 6 games below 500. The 7 and 8 seeds both have 29 wins each.
Also, what's funny is that the Knicks are 4 games back, or 3.5 to the ninth spot, which just shows you
they're
how
3.5 to the 9 seed and 9 out of 8th right now.
which just shows you how bad the
Yeah,
end of the East is. So I'll give you that there's no stories, and I think that's partially because no one's going to be a free agent next year. Like Bradley Beal signed his deal extension like in the offseason of last year, and Draymond Green did too. And
Oh
they were
yeah,
like
which
the only
it
sort.
almost ensures that next year is going to be the same fucking thing as this.
Right, but like to do devil's advocate, I really enjoy watching the actual basketball. Like I feel like LeBron and the Lakers are kind of like this proverbial favorite after they just beat the Bucks and the Clippers, but I feel like it's so much closer than it's been previously, where it's just like, oh, another Warriors win. Like they're just gonna win it all. So like, why even bother?
It's a little more up in
Um,
the air on the very, very, very top end of it.
yeah,
Like there's 3 teams that, if you're in a coma and wake up in 6 months, you wouldn't be stunned that any of them won. Lakers, Clippers, or Bucks. But it's like you got to wait till like mid to late May. It's late May.
well, no, there'll be good series between there though. Like the Heat are probably might play the Sixers. Like Jimmy Butler going back to Philadelphia for a playoff series.
Eh,
Like let's see Luka in his first series. Luka's been playing outstanding
yeah, they'll
too.
lose.
Yeah, probly, but like
Also,
it'll still
screw
be fun
Chris Stapps.
basketball.
All right.
Yeah, Chris Kristaps. We can just fuck KP.
Yeah, well, fuck KP.
All right, I think that's enough basketball talk. We're gonna go to the
Damn right it
politics
is.
side of it. Talk about Super Tuesday results. So Biden won
Yikes.
610 delegates, and then while Bernie scored 513 in a big win for the moderate wing of the Democratic Party and the mainstream media contributors such as Brian fucking Williams. So how are you feeling Tuesday night?
Well, I think that you kind of see what happened there, and you really, it was just one of those things where it just, makes you look at people differently, and I think anyone that's talked about this with people, you encounter, like, particularly, like, middle-aged and older, like, suburbanites. And again, none of them are, like, pro-Biden that I've encountered. I mean, my own parents are, voting for Bernie. But there's just always this sense that, like, yeah, like, that's just, I guess you just vote for Biden, like, that's just, he's the guy, I guess, and it's one of those things that feels like a bunch of people collectively just giving up, it's just like, fuck it, there is no future. I just want things to go on autopilot. I don't want to hear all the noise on the TV. And I think it also is very clear too, it is once again like proof of this kind of idea I've always had, that really, instead of actually any ideology, a lot of our factions politically, especially when it comes to electoral politics, come down to different forms of media consumption. I think people that watch cable news, which is the demographic that Biden absolutely kills it in, age-wise. I just saw a poll today from Quinnipiac where Biden, 65 and older, is winning 80%.
Oh, yeah.
And millennial age, 35 and younger, Bernie's winning 71%. And, I think that's a big pattern of that. I think people talk, how could you vote for Biden? Like, his brain is literally melting. He's dying on stage, basically. Like, you could see him but it's like, they don't see that. They don't know it's happening, and I think when you get to what happened on Super Tuesday, a lot of these bigger states, there was a couple states where, Liz Warren was a big problem, was what cost Bernie Texas and Massachusetts. Bernie would very well either virtually tied or maybe even have a delegate lead. But there were plenty of other states that he was also supposed to at least be competitive in and get more delegates in, where Liz Warren had nothing to do with it. And and it's a whole other story about what her deal is. And I think it's, something I've been saying the whole time. And it's that she's just, she's a corporate lawyer at heart. That's what she does. When every time she's confronted with anything, she bends right. But I think that's really what happened. And I think those kinds of people that buy into that form of media consumption of the news cycle and cable news, because those are the same people that have been lumped into all the impeachment stuff. You talk to them, and politics to them just ends up being about, like, what laws Trump is breaking. And to me, like, I couldn't give less of a shit about what laws Trump is breaking, because I just don't care about those laws and formalities. And they don't either. They don't care about those at all. Like, I don't care about that. Right. But, like, I think that's really what happened. That to me was what I kind of came to terms with after that happened. Was like, what, like, this stuff is more powerful than you think, but it's not totally that. It would be a different narrative right now, but also, I don't know if it would change the fact that, going into tomorrow, the polls are still looking pretty bad. The only thing encouraging that I don't want to hang too much hope on is that every single poll last time had Hillary beating Bernie by anywhere from like 12 to 20 something points in Michigan, and Bernie won Michigan. Every single poll. And you're seeing the exact same pattern this time with Biden polls against Sanders in Michigan. And, you think maybe they learned something. Maybe that was a fluke, freaky thing. I don't think people still know what went wrong with those polls last time. But really, that's really what he needs. If he at least wins Michigan, is just in the mix in some other states. He's got to win Washington as well, because that's supposed to be one that he's supposed to win to begin with. You're looking at things that get pretty interesting to the point where New York might actually matter next month, which would be kind of exciting. So, it's not good though. It's not good that many people, despite everything, all the changes in rhetoric, especially on the left side over the last few years, just kind of seems like it's up in smoke. The hopeless thing is it's like the thing that really drove it home for me was that Biden is not running a campaign in any recognizable sense.
Not at all.
It's recognizable in that he's on TV and he's at debates. So to a passive observer, it all looks real. But Tennessee, for example, he didn't. I mean, he won it pretty easily, and he spent $60,000 there.
He spent zero in Minnesota.
He was lagging in money. I mean, even to like people like Buttigieg in Klobuchar for a little while, especially after those first couple of states. He's not a good fundraiser. But they all just decided that, you know what, who knows what it is, and it's not conspiratorial to say that they all just decided to endorse him because, that's how it works. That's how party machines work. But I think, is like, who else was involved in that? Was Obama involved in that? Was, I'm sure Tom Perez was in the DNC, but like, was that what was going on?
So I don't know. I feel like if you're Amy or if you're Pete, like looking ahead, you're gonna get what 8 to 10% of the votes and win 0 states.
Well, they could see how bad they were doing with like any kind of minority voter whatsoever.
Exactly.
Because Bernie, is great with, he's killing it with Latinos in every state, which is a big reason why he won California and Nevada by pretty good margins. Also in Texas, there's this whole situation where like 44 precincts are demanding, like a county's demanding a recount. There's like 10% of the ballots are like just not counted.
Yeah, like Texas's lines were super fucking long.
Oh,
and
they
it
shut
looked
hundreds
like
of polling sites over the last like however long, like couple years, 750 over the last couple years.
And it looked like it was like specifically in like younger or more poor neighborhoods, like in Houston or like Austin.
Yeah,
it just seemed more ridiculous. Granted, Austin's kind of blowing up, and like it might just be like we didn't allocate for this many people coming to our city. I could see that more, but like Houston, like you should.
Austin's been blowing up for 10 years.
Right, but it keeps blowing up more. Like it keeps like increasing.
Yeah.
Like at a higher rate almost.
I think that's the bottom line though. Is really it's just that people can point the finger at that all they want. And it's unfair, and maybe it would create a different narrative going into this week. But fundamentally, that problem is there. That problem of completely different worlds existing within the electorate. And that's not a new thing, but I think so, in this case, it's just so stark because, like, it's obviously this campaign is a terrible idea, the Biden campaign. It's so obvious to anyone watching it. You can take his side. He could be like even if he was like even a Liz Warren type of progressive person, this is still a bad idea. He can't speak. He can't do anything. He can't do even you watch a clip from him 4 years ago, and he's way different even 4 years ago than he is now. It's crazy. I mean, Trump's the same way. I mean, as far as, you watch a clip of him 5 or 6 years ago or 10 years ago, he's way different than how he talks now. And it's just, it's so obvious that this is just a ploy to just keep the machine running, whether win or lose. They're pushing a defective product on people, and they know it. And it's very frustrating to see. It's not fair to call that many people dumb, maybe, but like it's a very dumb decision that a lot of people are making. And it sucks that like that many people just like don't give a shit about whether it's their nieces or nephews or grandkids or their own kids who their lives would be transformed by a lot of Bernie's policies, so even among those kind of social ties, you see this kind of like hyper individualism that takes hold and like personal branding preferences, which a lot of politics has become. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel good about anything going on tomorrow or last week. It's probably over.
So what I find really strange though is like you said that like when you watch cable or when you watch cable TV, like you get a very pro-Biden vibe, which you absolutely do. But then, like, when you're watching... So if you're watching those shows, how are you not watching these debates and, like, watching how he does in these debates and being like, okay, this guy's clearly doesn't really have it. Like, he seems, like, lost and kind of almost...
I'm way too into this shit, and I can tell you I didn't start watching any debates until, like, January.
Right, okay.
So I think that's a thing. He was not how he's normally been. in his South Carolina debate, which is still the most recent debate. It's insane that they let 24 states vote between debates. That's horrible. There should have been one this week.
Yeah.
Instead of having 12 of them in 2019. But that's also another story.
Yeah.
But I think that was part of it. I mean, he wasn't like crazily terrible in his last debate. So I think also it kind of, I don't know. Like I just don't know. I think, well, even the small things, right? The things he lies about, like how he recently lied about being arrested at, like protesting apartheid, like in the 80s or 90s, like saying how he was like, like he's like this glorious like social justice warrior back then. It turned out to be completely, it wasn't even like a slight mistruth. It was like totally fabricated. That never happened. But it wasn't covered. No one talked about it. No one gave a shit. They don't talk about his record. If you talk about his record, you're divisive. You're attacking Dems. You're attacking fellow Dems. I mean, that's really their whole playbook. And it's a playbook that's not just working in the U.S. It's a playbook you've seen throughout a lot of the Western world and also other parts of the world and other developed democracies as well. You saw this in December with Boris Johnson and Corbyn. Boris Johnson, everyone knew that he was full of shit. There were pundits saying that. Even pundits who are not like pro Corbyn or anything, who wanted Corbyn to lose, were saying that. He refused to debate. He refused to talk about anything, and he won in a landslide. Because all you have to do is just stay out of the way and let people form their own like weird imagination of what you are, and like the vague general stances you take on some of the bigger issues, and then just force your opponent to just kind of have to go all over the place scrambling. That's kind of the playbook, and I think it's a very similar playbook with Biden.
So, like, okay, to counter Corbyn, I'm pretty sure he was, like, pro-Brexit, too. So it's like...
He didn't run that way, though.
But, like, he was still for it.
Well,
so
he was more vague about it last time when he won all those seats back in 2017. I think a big problem in his case, and it's a problem that sometimes Bernie has, but he's been better about it, and I don't blame him too much for what's going on. But there is, even among, and Corbyn, I think, is more genuinely ran as actual socialist than anything Bernie Sanders is talking about.
Right, but like in the United States, if you talk about Medicare for all, you're automatically a socialist.
Right.
That's just how.
Yes, right, and to Bernie's credit, a lot of his platform is to the left of even many European countries and even to Canada, what Canada has. But with Corbyn, and Bernie sometimes does this too, is like there's still this like, because they're both been politicians for so long, and they've been in these worlds regardless of how like separate from it they are, how radical they might be sometimes, where they still feel the need to bend to like the fake liberal outcry about stuff, where they take their arguments, especially about like, anti-Semitism was the big thing with Corbyn, which you can't do with Sanders because obviously he's Jewish. But that was a thing where they always felt the need to backtrack on that. Then they decided to include Brexit as like part of their platform. Like, oh, if we win, we'll have a new deal. We'll have a deal about a new like Brexit deal, and then you'll get to vote on that as a country. So he's incorporating that. Instead, he lost all of the pro-Brexit voters that he won over when he broke Theresa May's majority, and then they all went to Boris Johnson. That's ultimately what they wanted. Boris Johnson's whole campaign was literally get Brexit done. That was the slogan. That's all anyone cared about. They didn't care about their health care. And also, I will say this about Boris Johnson, which is a big difference among conservatives in this part of the Western world. He ran on, and not that I believe he'll do it, but he ran on increasing funding to the NHS. He ran on, and that's a thing a lot of European right-wingers do, is like when they feel it's necessary, and Trump did it to some degree, but then never did it consistently enough, I don't think, of like saying like, oh, I'm going to, increase funding to these public programs, I'll protect them, so there was that aspect too. So there is this habit among guys like Corbyn or even Bernie. I mean, Bernie won't go hard after Biden, and I think that's part of that same phenomenon of getting trapped into this kind of like into the liberal narrative. And the liberal narrative over here, instead of being Brexit, is how are you going to defeat Trump? Focus on Trump. Don't trash your opponents. I think Bernie should be very clear, and it's probably hard for him because I think he knows Biden pretty well. I think he likes him from everything I've seen and heard. And he probably doesn't want to ever go out there. And he never said a bad word about Liz Warren either, even though she went up there and called him a liar on national TV. But he can't go out there and just say, like, yeah, Biden can't run for president. Like, besides the fact that he's just, like, one of the more, like, distinct and, like, awful neoliberals of the last 40 years in every single way, he won't say something like that. And I think that's been a big problem, too, is that he wasn't making that clear enough among the electorate in his messaging.
Right. So, I mean, like, I don't think it would work either way. Like, I think if he attacked Biden,
it would have worked if he did it much earlier on.
I don't really see it. I think a lot of people are just thinking that he's too left, and, like, they don't look at the polls and see that, like, if you, in these battleground states, like, Bernie actually does almost better than Biden does.
Yeah.
But people don't see that because they think, like, oh, he's a socialist.
Bernie made nowhere near the same mistakes that Corbyn has made.
Yeah, true. But, like, I don't know. It's just kind of depressing.
Brexit was a big thing, that really makes this. People want to compare these two elections, but Brexit was a thing where people just really were all about that, and a lot of what won Corbyn, a lot of people, and what kind of to a degree, what wins Bernie, at least what people thought Bernie might win among a lot of people, is win those kind of disaffected, just kind of ideologically fluid, just kind of anti-establishment people who tend to veer right wing because a lot of times, but especially the last 10 years, the right wing tried to position itself as some kind of anti-establishment, especially in Trump being the end result of that. And I think it should be a lesson that once again, it's hard to do because it's so everywhere. It's not, even if you don't watch cable news or the whole mainstream media thing, it's so everywhere, and it's so much a part of like what we consider to be like, sane and rational thought, that it's very hard to buck those trends, especially when you are in that world, when you're a politician or when you're surrounded by media people all the time. It's hard to kind of stay true to your own narrative. Because a leftist and pro-Brexit position was just deemed incoherent, just not only by his fellow Labour Party members or some of them, but by the Lib Dems, by the BBC, by the media, so that he just felt pressured, like, okay, I'll side with them on the Brexit thing, and I'll still focus on the NHS and all that other stuff. But that was just so much more of a mistake, though. I think Bernie's big mistakes have just been, just not being clear enough early on about how dire some of his competitors are as candidates, as politicians. And he's been consistently unable to do that. Although he does do it more than, I think other politicians I've rooted for in the past have done that. I think that an underrated thing about Obama when he was running in 2008, even in 2012 to a degree, he came across so smooth when he did it, so people didn't think of him as this, but he was a shit talker. He did a lot of some similar things that you saw someone like Trump doing. He would go up there and almost do like this like stand-up routine, once in a while. Some of his rallies were just like him just clowning on people he was facing. I mean, he did it to Hillary all the time in 2008 during the primary. Mitt Romney, he went and made fun of. I don't know if you remember that whole rumor that Mitt Romney and their family like had a family vacation where they like strapped the dog's cage to the roof or something.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, okay, yeah. It was like this whole like one of those little election year like mini controversies, and he was like talking about that and like making fun of that, like targeting his family, stuff like that. Like people latch onto that, like that's fun, and Bernie like doesn't do that at all. I mean, even Obama is much more, at least when it comes to attacking his opponents, is much more severe. When he was campaigning, but then when he governed was, as we all know, way too friendly with them, much friendlier than I think Bernie would be as someone in power. But that's the mistake. He should have went harder earlier, especially at someone like Biden. I think his campaign, maybe not him, but his campaign and me included too, were like, okay, Biden truly can't win a state. If you're a vice president repeatedly coming in third or fourth, fifth place in the early states, it's unprecedented that you come back from that. It's never happened.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. Well, he put all his eggs in South Carolina, and he
Right. Well,
won
he
by a
banked on that
landslide.
media narrative
Yeah.
change, and he was right to do that. He knew that they would rush to crown him as, the guy who can. I think especially since he knew how bad the other people in his lane, the other moderates, were among black voters. Especially since his numbers among black voters are, dominant. Even as we saw with Bernie, I mean, they called Virginia even, which is supposed to be a state that was a toss-up, they called it the second the polls closed. So his advantages over that, I think that was a big factor in his strategy and also in, some of the other moderates, how they just rallied behind him immediately.
Yeah. I mean, all he has to say is, like, I was Obama's VP.
Yep.
You pretty much have, like, 20
yeah.
million votes. Like, that's almost guaranteed.
It sucks. It really sucks.
Yeah. I guess on that morbid note, I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you, Chris, for coming on. Do you have any other last segments or?
Well, I would just say that, it's not the end of stuff. Who knows what'll happen. I mean, maybe Biden will probably lose.
Yeah.
I think, which is very bad, especially when you think of the courts and how they've already approved a record amount of federal judges, for a first term. So that's very bad. But I don't know. It's tough because, with things like climate change, it's tough to be like, oh, yeah, well, this is kind of accelerationist mentality. It's tough to have that because it's like, okay, well, what are we accelerating towards? There's a ticking time bomb. And, losses like this can only keep happening for so long. But, people just they gotta stay organized. Someone like Bernie has been fighting this long. So I don't think, especially if you're someone our age, that you can throw in the hat now. Someone like Bernie or even like Corbyn, that generation of guys of leftists, have seen so much worse over so much longer of a period of time. And, we got to learn from them. Doesn't mean losing's okay. Doesn't mean that we can keep doing this. We got to learn from it.
Yeah.
But this was never going to be the end result anyways. So, you got to keep going. And, maybe, who knows, maybe the polls will all be wrong again, just like they were last time. All 12 of them will all be wrong again. And he'll pull out Michigan, and maybe the narrative will change. We'll see.
Yeah. We should sit back and wait. I think you nailed it on the head, though. Like, you got to go out and do other stuff too, especially after like presidential.
Well, also
elections.
not just go out like generally, but like what you're doing matters, right? Like things like canvassing are important, but like what we're seeing, especially, is that has limited reach. Because also anyone's gone canvassing knows like half the time nobody's fucking home when you're canvassing, when you're knocking on
or answering their door, like
half the time like you're not talking to people like most of the time you're not really even having conversations. Like it's a fact you have to do it, but at the same time, like until we get to a point where, the workplace and the idea of work, those are the points of political struggle. We're always going to be limited in how much we can actually achieve because as long as politics and work are that separate, we're going to be stuck in this trap for a long time. Doesn't mean we'll never make any electoral gains, but, you're going to continually see this complete. That's the only place we can unify people to those kind of goals and ideals is at the workplace because that's what everybody shares. We can't rely on media narratives. We can't rely on creating those kinds of structures without that because even if we do, they won't be upheld and they'll fail because they have all the money. And so they get to control how that narrative shakes out. So until the workplace becomes the point of struggle, you're going to see this kind of cycle play itself out over and over again because people are still going to be so detached from leftist ideas and be at least maybe not afraid of leftist ideas anymore, but definitely confused and alienated by them, which I think is more of the problem now than actually, Red Scare type stuff. Because I've been hearing my whole life, the old people, they're going to die. They're going to go away eventually. It's like, well, the old people are, a lot of old people are probably going to be alive for another 20 years. That's a lot of elections. So, people don't, especially people that are old people that vote are, tend to be slightly upper income, like they're not going to die right away. We can't rely on that, so those are the kinds of changes. That's not what anyone wants to hear because it doesn't necessarily it's not an immediate answer, and it's not something that makes immediate sense because, like, what does it mean to have the workplace at the point of struggle? But I think it's the truth. And, just try and not, I think one thing I would say to people too is try and not don't alienate yourself from regular people. There's a tendency among a lot of leftist circles to and I'm not saying this as an outsider. I'm saying this, as someone who, and I love the people I've organized with, but where there's this constant separation or even a disdain for normie culture, for a lot of the places that a lot of regular people, things that they have conversations about, music they listen to, sports in general. Not always, but a lot of times, right? You're not going to find a very receptive audience if you talk about sports in leftist circles.
Yeah, no.
No, you won't. Yeah, it's a rarity. Or if they do, they only like one sport very much, and all the other ones kind of fuck off.
Yeah, and they think it's terrible organizations that mistreat athletes, which is slightly true, but
it's true, but
don't be a douche.
To me, it's not innate. It's not if sports were innately bad, the idea of them, they don't have to be bad. They're always going to be somewhat harmful because they're physical activities, right? People are still going to get hurt. But they don't have to be so exploitative. That's just a byproduct of the system we're in. Just a lot of mass culture, that gets again ignored by a lot of left. We have to be able to exist in those kinds of spaces with people while still, holding on. Doesn't mean you compromise, but you have to make those things not seem like they're part of a subculture, and that's changing. That's why Bernie is where he is right now, even. It's not changing fast enough. And maybe it will. I mean, you even see this with, how people treat Cortez, who I think, some of that's been deserved, especially when she made some missteps early on in her career. But people getting on her about, enjoying a Saturday Night Live skit, which, yeah, SNL sucks shit. I get it, but if she wants to like some normie shit and she considers herself a leftist, then you gotta let that happen. We gotta be in those spaces sometimes. That's where the people are. That's where the Biden voters are. And
yeah,
that's kind of that's kind of my thought about all of it, is that we're still not there yet in penetrating those spaces.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's hope that people become less shitty or just nicer people.
Just let go, let go of your subculture, let go of your inhibitions about talking about being around different kinds of people who, and it could be hard because maybe maybe you're just weird, but we have to be bringing in, we can't have every time there's an upsurge in socialist organizing that it's all these weird loners, right? And there's nothing wrong with that because people need solidarity and they need to feel like they're a community, even if we should be accepting everybody. But we have to be penetrating the spaces where it's not weird to be doing organizing. It's not alienating for people. It doesn't feel like they have their whole life and then there's organizing and socialism on the side. They have to be intertwined, but that goes back to my point about the workplace being the point of struggle. So it's a lot of work to do.
Yep, definitely. I think we'll end it at that note. If you have any questions or concerns or whatever,
probably concerns a lot.
Yeah, right. You want to talk about the workplace struggle with Chris Amato? Email snowflakesportspod@gmail.com. Please rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts.
Follow Chris Cross over on Twitter.
All right, peace.